The moment I turned out of the McGee-Tyson Airport terminal, my phone lit up on the passenger seat with a message from my neighbor. I almost didn't look at it. The drive home from Knoxville's airport is 20 minutes with light traffic, and I was already looking forward to the quiet. 2 weeks of quiets, just me, Marion's orchids in the bay window, and the model of the Henley Street Bridge I'd been meaning to finish since February. But something made me glance down. The text was from Opal, 3 lines, no punctuation, which meant she was typing fast. Emmett, don't come home yet. I'm outside your house, and there's a cab in your driveway. I pulled into a gas station on Kingston Pike. My hands were steady when I typed back. What do you mean a cab? Her reply came in under 10 seconds. I came to water Marion's orchids like you asked. There's a yellow cab out front, and I can see light moving inside. Someone is in there. I reached for the security app on my phone. I'd installed the cameras 3 years ago, right after Marion's diagnosis. She used to forget things, small things at first, a pot on the stove, her keys in the refrigerator, and I wanted to be able to check on her from work. After she passed, I kept the cameras running. I told myself it was habit. The truth is the house still feels like her, and I wasn't ready to stop watching over it. I clicked into the living room feed. For a second, I thought I'd opened the wrong camera, because the people I saw inside my house were the same 2 people I had just dropped at the terminal 22 minutes ago. My son and his wife. I am 67 years old. For 39 of those years, I worked as a structural engineer, mostly bridges and highway overpasses across East Tennessee. I know how to read stress points. I know that structures almost never fail where you expect. It's the quiet corners, the joints nobody checks, the slow accumulation of small compromises that nobody bothered to document. I thought I knew my son. Dalton is 34. He has my jaw and Marion's eyes, the kind that look like they're always about to ask you something thoughtful. He was a good kid who struggled in his 20s, found it hard to hold steady work, spent more than he made, borrowed money he paid back slow. I made excuses for him the way fathers do. Boys take time to find their footing. Marion always said that. When he married Selena 5 years ago, I told myself she was good for him. She was polished in a way that was almost blinding, always dressed a level above, wherever she was, always charming to the right people, always saying the right things at the right volume. She called me Dad from the first month. I should have noticed sooner that charm this calculated is just performance. The trip to Savannah was Selena's idea. She announced it at dinner 2 Sundays ago, their 5th anniversary, a long weekend on the Georgia coast. Could I drive them to the airport Thursday morning? Of course I could. I was glad they were doing something together. Dalton had seemed tense lately, distracted in a way he tried to hide behind his phone. I loaded 2 carry-ons into my truck. They didn't check any bags. I thought that was strange for a 4-day trip, but I didn't say anything. I hugged my son at the Delta terminal. He hugged me back the way people hug when they're already somewhere else in their heads. "Take care of yourself, Dad," Selena said, and kissed me on the cheek. Her perfume was something expensive and heavy that I could still smell 20 minutes later. Now I was sitting in a gas station parking lot on Kingston Pike, watching them walk through my front door on a 4-inch screen. I watched Selena drop her carry-on in the foyer and kick the door shut with her heel. The transformation was immediate and total. Every inch of the performance fell away. "Is he on the highway yet?" Her voice was different without the warmth in it, clipped and flat, like a woman who doesn't enjoy having to be patient. Dalton checked his phone. "GPS says he just passed Cedar Bluff. We've got time." She turned to the living room, and I saw her eyes move across everything the way a person's eyes move when they are assessing value. She looked at the mounted television, at Marion's china cabinet, at the corner where I keep my collection of early edition engineering books, first editions some of them, going back to the 1940s. Then she walked to the wall beside the staircase. That wall is where I hung the shadow box. Marion made it herself, 2 Christmases before her diagnosis. It's a deep oak frame behind glass, and inside she arranged things, a photograph of us at our first date in 1981 outside the Tennessee Theater, her Teacher of the Year certificate from 1994, a pressed flower from our wedding, and a handwritten recipe card in her handwriting for the cornbread she made every Thanksgiving. It's the only handwriting of hers I have left. Selina lifted it off the wall and turned it over in her hands, examining the back the way you examine something at a yard sale. "Who frames a recipe card?" she said. "Who does that?" She set it down on the console table with the careless thud of someone who has already decided a thing doesn't matter. The corner of the frame hit the edge wrong. I heard the crack through the small speaker on my phone. The shadow box slid and fell and hit the hardwood floor. The glass shattered. Marion's recipe card slid out from the frame and landed face down in the broken pieces. I sat very still in my truck. There are moments in a man's life when he understands with total clarity that anger is a luxury he cannot afford. This was one of those moments. If I had gone home right then, if I had turned the truck around and driven back to my own house, I would have done something I couldn't take back. I'm 67 years old, but the men in my family ran hot until the end. My father was still ready to fight at 72. I put the truck in park. I breathed. I am an engineer. I solve problems from the inside. You don't stop a flood by running at it. You reroute it. I called Sherman. Sherman Pruitt has been my attorney for 21 years and my friend for 35. We went to UT together, stood up in each other's weddings, played golf badly on the same municipal course for 2 decades. He retired from the DA's office 12 years ago and went into private practice. Estate planning, asset protection, the kind of work that sounds dull until you need it. He picked up on the second ring. "Emmett, aren't you supposed to be heading home?" "I need you to listen to me very carefully," I said. I told him everything. Opal's text, the cameras, what I'd seen. Selina's voice when she thought I was 20 minutes away and getting farther. Sherman was quiet for a long moment. "How bad do you think it is?" "I don't know the full picture yet," I said. "But Sherman, you remember what we set up after Marion passed? The documents we filed with the trust company?" "Every word of it," he said. "Good. Don't move yet. I need to know exactly what they're after before I show my hand." I pulled back onto Kingston Pike and drove in the opposite direction of home. I didn't want a hotel with a valet who'd remember my truck. I found a comfort inn off the interstate and paid cash. The room smelled like old carpet cleaner and someone else's bad week, but it had a decent Wi-Fi signal, and that was what mattered. I opened my laptop. I pulled up every camera feed and turned the audio gain all the way up. They'd been busy. Selina was going through Marion's china cabinet with the practiced eye of someone who knows resale value. She was careful with the pieces, setting them on the dining table with the delicate attention of someone who understands what things are worth, but feels nothing about where they came from. Dalton was at my desk with his phone pressed to his ear. "Lance, it's me. Yeah, we're in. He's gone, we've got the house. Listen, the safe is the issue. Biometric, reinforced, built into the study wall behind the bookshelf. I need you here by 9 with the bypass kit." A pause. I know, man. Tell them I'll have the money by Monday." He hung up. He sat at my desk with his face in his hands. $340,000 was the number I heard Selina say, out loud an hour later, when she didn't realize I had the audio feed turned up. Sports betting, online accounts, and the kind of local operation that doesn't ask for ID. He'd started during the pandemic, from what I could piece together over the next few hours. It escalated the way those things always do. Marion never knew. I thought the nervousness I'd noticed in him lately was work stress. Selina had known for a year. Instead of pushing him to come to me, she'd spent that year building a plan. I sat in that motel room listening to them map out my house, my savings, my life, and I thought about the morning I finished my first bridge. A small pedestrian overpass in Maryville, nothing that would make a textbook. But I walked from one end to the other and felt the structure hold beneath my feet and thought, I made something that will still be here after I'm gone. That's what Marion and I had tried to build together, something that would hold. I wasn't going to let them take it apart in a weekend. I opened the security app and disabled the external alarm relay. I didn't want the police arriving before I was ready. I wanted them all the way inside the trap before I closed it. Then I called Sherman back and told him everything. Sherman confirmed what I already knew about the trust. Marion had come to me 14 months before she died, sat down at the kitchen table with a legal pad covered in her neat school teacher handwriting and said, Emmett, I want to make sure none of this becomes a fight after I'm gone. The Marion Blackwell Living Trust was irrevocable. I was the trustee. Dalton was listed as a contingent beneficiary, subject to conditions he had already violated 6 ways to Sunday. Lance could bring every bypass device in Tennessee to that safe and still walk away with nothing he could legally touch. But Selena didn't know that. In a well-designed trap, ignorance is load-bearing. Dalton called me at 9:47. I let it ring 4 times before I picked up. I put a roughness in my voice that didn't take much acting. 67 years of Tennessee summers and 30 years of job sites does something permanent to a man's throat. Hey, bud, thought y'all would be halfway to Savannah by now. Dad. His voice was warm in that performed way, too controlled. Something came up. Flight got canceled, weather system moving in down south. We're going to try to rebook in the morning. Just wanted to make sure you got home all right. I listened to the background behind his voice. In the silence between his words, I heard it. My grandfather clock in the hallway, striking the quarter hour. That clock has a particular tone, solid brass with a slight flatness on the left bell, a sound you would recognize anywhere if you grew up in that house. I got home fine, I said, just tired. Think I took my blood pressure pill on an empty stomach, feeling a little foggy. Half a second of silence, just enough. You should eat something, Dad. You know how you get. I'm just going to turn in early. You two be safe now. Call me when you land. I hung up and switched to the living room camera. Selena was standing next to Dalton. Her eyes were lit. He said he took his blood pressure medication on an empty stomach, Dalton told her. She smiled perfect. He'll sleep hard. I drove home at 11:15. I parked down the street under the oak on the Miller's side, where my truck would look like it had been sitting there all week. I did not go in through the front door. I went in through the basement. I built that house in 1993, and I know every entrance and every weakness, including the basement window that doesn't latch all the way, because the frame swelled in a wet spring, and I never replaced the hardware. I squeezed through, not graceful, but quiet, and I was inside my own house before midnight. I went to the guest room where Dalton always kept his laptop. It was open, unlocked. The folder was labeled LO Consulting. Inside, spreadsheets, vendor invoices, payments to subcontractors for labor and materials that existed only on paper. Money moving in through a shell company registered in Delaware, money moving out as fake renovation expenses, cleaned and untraceable on the other end. My son was washing money for the people he owed. I recognized the structure the way I recognize a poorly reinforced joint, not immediately obvious until you look at where the weight is going. I plugged in the small flash drive I keep on my keychain. 39 years in the field teaches you to always have a backup. The files copied in under 2 minutes. I sat there in the blue light of his screen and looked at Dalton's desktop wallpaper. It was a photo of the two of us at a Tennessee Volunteers game, maybe 10 years ago. He's wearing the orange scarf Marion knitted him the Christmas before. We're both laughing at something out of frame. I pulled the drive out. I closed the laptop exactly as I'd found it. I went back to the hallway, and I went to sit in the dark on the basement stairs with my back straight and my hands quiet in my lap. The house was still around me. The same walls Marion and I had painted 3 times in 30 years. The same floors she had refinished herself with a rented sander and more patience than I would have had. I was not going to lose it this way. At 7 in the morning, I knocked on my own front door. Dalton answered. He looked like he hadn't slept. When he saw me, his face went through 3 expressions in under a second. Surprise, calculation, forced warmth. Dad, I thought, how'd you get here? I couldn't sleep, I said. I let my voice drift a little at the edges, soft and vague. Drove myself home, got confused in the night. I didn't know where I was for a little while. I watched him recalibrate. He stepped back and let me in. What followed was the hardest performance of my life, and I mean that as a compliment to myself. I shuffled. I asked twice where Marion was. I called Dalton by my late brother's name. When Selena came downstairs, bright and assembled and ready, I looked through her like she was a window. The man she'd arranged arrived at 10:15. Dr. Morton Blaine, though that name hadn't appeared on any active Tennessee medical license since the state board action 3 years prior. He was carrying a worn leather briefcase, and the confident manner of someone who has made a career out of being just useful enough that people overlook his liabilities. He asked me 3 orientation questions in the slow, loud voice people use when they've already made up their minds. I told him the year was 2004. I said the president's name wrong. He wrote something on a notepad he tilted away from me. He signed the capacity evaluation form in 11 seconds flat. I watched Selena take the form from his hand. She looked at it the way Marion looked at Dalton the morning he was born. The FBI team came through the front door at 11:43. I was sitting in my recliner when they arrived. I had positioned myself there deliberately, beside the bay window where Marion's orchids still grow, white and pale pink, the same varieties she always kept. I wanted them to find me where a man who lived in this house would naturally be found. Selena heard the knock and went to the door expecting Lance. She got 6 federal agents in windbreakers. What happened in the next 30 minutes I will not pretend was clean. There is no simple satisfaction in watching your son be handcuffed in your own living room. There is no moment where the rightness of it washes away the weight. I sat in that recliner, and I watched the agents move through my house, with the particular efficiency of people who have done this many times, and I felt something I hadn't felt since Marion's funeral, a grief that had nothing to do with being surprised. But I did not look away. They had earned the right to be witnessed. Sherman arrived at noon with the blue portfolio. He set it on Marion's dining table, the one she refinished herself in 1998, the one that had held 40 Thanksgivings, and he opened it with the calm of a man who has been quietly waiting for a long time. Everything in this house, Sherman said to Selena, who was standing rigid beside an agent, belongs to the Marion Blackwell Living Trust. Emmett is the trustee. He manages it. He cannot sell it or transfer it. Neither can a court-appointed guardian, because guardianship applies to the person, not to assets held by an irrevocable trust that exists entirely independent of him. She looked at me. You set me up, she said. Marion set this up, I said. 14 months before she died. She was a school teacher for 31 years. She understood exactly what it meant to build something that would last. I watched them walk her out. I watched them walk Dalton out. He didn't say anything until he reached the door. Then he stopped and turned around, and he looked at the bay window where Marion's orchids were blooming. The shadow box, he said. His voice was barely there. Did it? Is her recipe card? It's salvageable, I said. I'll have the glass replaced. He nodded once. Then they took him out. Opal came over that afternoon with a casserole dish, and the good sense not to ask me to explain everything at once. She filled Marion's old kettle and made 2 cups of tea, and we sat at the kitchen table and didn't say much for a long while. Are you all right? She finally asked. I'm standing, I said. She nodded like that was a complete answer, because it was. After she left, I went to the study. I opened the safe. My combination is the date Marion and I got engaged, plus the latitude of the Tennessee River Bridge where I proposed, which no one is ever going to guess, and I took out a folder from the bottom of the stack. It was a bank statement from 4 years ago, during Marion's last 6 months in memory care, when the bills were coming in hard. I'd noticed the discrepancy myself, a series of small withdrawals from our household account, $200 here, $300 there, never large enough to flag automatically. Over 4 months, it totaled just under $3,000. I'd hired a forensic accountant to trace it quietly. The transfers had gone to a payment app registered to my son's phone. I sat with that folder in my hands for a long time. I thought about the day I could have walked in wherever he was and laid it on the table and watched his face. I thought about what Marion would have said. She would have said, "He's scared, Emmett." People who steal from people they love are always scared of something. She would have said, "Give him a chance to be better." I gave him that chance. 4 years of silence. 4 years of waiting for him to come to me on his own, to admit something, to ask for help. Yesterday morning at the breakfast table, when I sat across from him and offered him a plain and open road back, he looked me in the eye and drove straight past it. I took the folder to the fireplace. I lit the corner with Marion's long-reach candle lighter. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. Forgiveness is for when the other person is ready to receive it. This was something else, a decision that I would not carry this anymore. The debt would live inside him now, not inside me. That was enough. That was all I had left to give. I set the grate back and stood up straight. Outside, the evening was coming in slow and gold the way it does in East Tennessee in late spring. Marion's dogwoods along the side yard were still in bloom, a few weeks past their peak, but hanging on. She planted those trees in 1995 because she said, a house needs something that comes back every year to remind you that things do. I got my keys from the hook by the door. I had no particular place to be. For the first time in longer than I could clearly remember, I had an evening with no one else's crisis sitting on top of it, no debt to cover, no plan to outmaneuver, no role to play. I backed the truck out of the driveway and drove toward the river. The pedestrian bridge I built in Maryville is still there. I drove past it last fall and slowed down long enough to look at it properly. 32 years old and not a visible crack in the concrete. I am not a vain man, but I felt something when I looked at it. Something quiet and certain, the feeling you get when you know that a thing you made was made right. Some structures hold. If you build them honestly, with the right materials and no corners cut, they hold long past the person who built them. Marion knew that. She built one too. She built it out of legal documents and careful handwriting, and 39 years of choosing, every single day, to stay beside me. It held this week when everything else tried to come down. I pressed the gas and let the river road open up ahead of me. I did not check the rearview mirror. I have never found anything useful back there that I couldn't see better by just paying attention to where I was going.